David here with EduSource. We've got what I think is a really good session here for you. We've got Allyson Gibson from BYU representing the engineering side of the aisle, who's going to be speaking to Capstone, that side of experiential learning, and then Arline MacCormack from the business side of the aisle, speaking to experiential learning from that perspective, and she hails from Babson. So I think we learn a lot in this session about just the state of experiential learning across the nearly 100 universities and colleges that participated in this year's benchmarking survey. We're also looking at history in the last 4 years of benchmarking we've done and how things have changed, and getting some really good commentary from the audience and our presenters along the way. If you enjoy this session and you're watching it on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, because we do post more content like this a few times a year. And also, if you want to see the slides for this and you're on YouTube, go to edusource.com/experiential academy. That is where you're going to be able to see our whole history of stuff that we've published, including the slides here. So thanks so much for watching. Let's get into the content. We have a bit of a panel here today with Allyson Gibson from BYU representing the engineering side of the aisle, and Arline MacCormack representing Babson on the business side of the aisle. And Arline actually in some ways straddles both undergrad and has some engagement with graduate, and you're going to hear about that in a bit. But Allyson, do you want to give just a quick intro of what you do and a little bit about your program?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Brigham Young University, our capstone program in engineering consists of mechanical, electrical, computer, manufacturing engineering students, as well as some cybersecurity students. So we have a multidisciplinary program, about 350 students. We're currently running 56 teams this year, and having fun with it. So engineering side.
And no pressure, by the way, to represent an entire discipline. But part of the idea today is to look at insights across many schools, but also the personal. So for everybody on this call, the chat is open, the Q&A is open as well, so you can submit there. And we're looking for anecdotes too, because those are just as important and in a lot of cases more helpful. And Allyson and Arline are here to help add that commentary. And Arline, of course, from Babson, known you for many years, so redundant for me, I know, but for the audience, could you give us a quick intro?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Arline MacCormack. As David said, I'm from Babson College. My title is the Associate Director of Advanced Experiential Programs. In my role, I work with Faculty Director Joseph Weintraub, and we run a management consulting field experience program where we have teams of undergraduate students who work on projects for real clients. It's a 4-credit elective, and we have these teams managed by MBA students, which is a really cool model. Recently, I moved into a new role in the Office of Experiential Learning, and we now have implemented an advanced experiential learning requirement for graduation. And so in my new role, I'll also be doing this management consulting field experience program, but also approving courses to meet this advanced experiential requirement and helping faculty get their courses to that point. So I'm excited to learn from you all today and hear what others have to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Arline. And I'm David. A lot of you already know me, but a lot of you probably also know Allyson and Arline. I'm from EduSource. So we had this crazy idea a long time ago that there should be a software tool for experiential learning. And at the time, the state of the market was everything was completely ad hoc, total entropy. Stuff wasn't really organized. And what you'll see through the results of today's survey are that schools are trending toward a little more organization. So we've sought to build a platform where you can kind of house everything related to industry projects, but still protect those very valuable industry relationships that your schools have, and house that and insource that, but have a dashboard to organize things. And as a result of my job, I just hear from a lot of experiential programs. So you know, that today's not really about me. I'm just going to try to provide commentary on some of these results based on what I hear from people across the board. So the first item of business is who participated. And we're going to do some live polling here too, provided I can figure out Zoom's live polling, but we're going to try, fingers crossed. But today for 2022, who participated. Now, over the last 4 years, it's been almost 400 participants, but most of the data you see here will be clearly from 2022. The only thing that really surprised me here was, let me get my laser pointer out. Always wanted to say that. Here we go. 20% leadership. That's large. They're overrepresented here, clearly. That surprised me at first, but maybe because experiential learning is so important to the institution, you can get leadership's attention with something even as tactical as this survey, because this survey does get quite a bit into the weeds. So who participated across the disciplines? So just a lay of the land, largely business and engineering, some multi-college activity, and of course other, and I know some of you on this call represent that other. Colleges of liberal arts, for example, just as important. It's just that those programs tend to have less of this kind of live industry-based experiential learning, but when they do, it's awesome. A big fan of that. But anyway, this is just simply a lay of the land. So the first question was, are live clients involved? And clearly, overwhelmingly, yes, for all or most. This year, there was an increase from last year, but it really is just getting back to pre-COVID levels. So in 2020, the number was 96. Now we're at 95. Last year, I heard from a lot of you panicked that maybe the project sponsors or hosts or whatever your name is for it, but basically the client on the project, they were all going to go away because COVID. It turns out, thankfully for everyone involved, industry still needs a talent pipeline, and they still need those touch points with the university. So they really didn't go away, but what little bit it dipped, it came back. And then this is the breakdown of the answer across disciplines. So we're going to look at this for most questions. Allyson, you had said all, I'm looking here, I sneak peeked into your guys' inputs on the survey. All projects are completed for outside partners. Has it always been that way? And why that? What's the value in just all in on industry partners?
Yes, and every year we have some competition teams. So we'll have 3 or 4 or 5 competition teams that are not industry sponsored, but we find that the students have a better experience in general when you're working with a live client. That way they have that interaction with the client and they feel like that is something of value to someone other than just the professor that they're used to working with. So it really brings a level of engagement that we don't see when they just have an academic assignment. And
Arline, you had said some of these projects are live clients. So how do you get to that? What's that mix look like and why?
Well, I guess now at this point, I'd say most of them are with live clients, but we do have projects that are submitted by the school on occasion. Our students don't tend to pick those projects. They're not as interested in working on challenges that we're having in our organization. But yes, most of our projects are with live clients.
Okay. And yeah, and to be clear, some or most, I mean, that was really, we don't want to give too many options and overwhelm people, but I suspect most would probably be the answer for most folks on here. There's still some results coming in, but let me pop this real quick.
I would add also, David, just when working with real clients, another thing our students look to is, I'd like to work there in the future. And so they become invested and get on the capstone teams of places where they're interested in working down the line.
Okay, and we need to talk about that toward the end too, because I saw in one of your responses about the value of experiential learning with job placement. And it was a little different than I expected, but I think I know the reason why, but this ties into what you just said. So we need to circle back on that because that's a big topic. And I think a lot of room for improvement, but that'll make more sense in a bit. So this is selection bias, the poll. 97% said yes, of course, because you probably wouldn't be here if not. But we'll get into some more interesting questions here soon. But basically just knowing who all is on this call, 52 of you, currently 130 registered, and almost everybody does live industry projects. And my guess is any of you that are thinking about it. Question just came in, and I'm just going to say your first name. I don't want to butcher your last name. I'm sorry, but Maria asked, could you explain the definition of live? Does remote count as live? Yeah, it does. And that's a great point. We should add more commentary to this question when we ask next year. So live simply means it's not a canned or scripted pre-written project. So remote, totally fine. Whether it's remote or local, that is, of course, going to vary on your program. Are you a rural campus? Are you an urban campus? What's your landscape look like? Do you want the students to have international experience? Lots of reasons to do one way or the other. But live, of course, just does mean what you're saying. Even if it's remote, that's still live. Is it a requirement? So this one's interesting. And really, I mean, this is up to, of course, the curricular committee, right? Whether or not this is a requirement. No one person probably is going to set this. But what I think is interesting is the movement over time from 49% to 2019 to 62% 2022. That's a big, in my mind, at least, that's a big change in higher ed in just 4 years. And that's 380 some touch points, a lot of them being the same schools year to year. We've seen some movement. So Arline, I guess I'll ask you first, where do you guys sit on the requirement, and any commentary or context you can add?
Yes, David, we just implemented an advanced experiential learning requirement for our students that entered Babson last fall. So we have 3 years with that group to get them into an advanced experiential course. And we have 5 parameters for our course. It has to be an applied project. It has to work with an external client. There has to be reflection, but we are now requiring some sort of advanced experiential course in order for graduation.
Okay.
And just moved there.
Brand new. And did you hear from leadership or people involved making that decision? What was the big motivation?
Well, I think we all know, we look at the research and it tells us that students learn better and they retain better, and they get so many advantages out of doing these live projects. That Babson is very entrepreneurial. We have lots of it right from the moment our students enter the school. The first year they start their own businesses. So, we have always been a big believer in experiential learning, and now we're just pushing it through our whole 4 years while our students are there.
Whenever I hear you talk about that, and it's been a couple times over the years, I always regret I didn't apply to go to Babson because I started a business in school and my school fought me about it. But that's neither here nor there. Allyson, of course, on the engineering side, it's expected, it's a requirement. But do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because not everybody here comes from an engineering school.
Yeah, so we use our capstone for our ABET accreditation. We're required for accreditation to do an experiential learning type team-based project. And while we do other small ones in other classes, capstone is really our big one where we report back to the accreditation board on that. And yeah, so we've been doing it for in mechanical engineering for about 30 plus years now.
And that's kind of the theme, I think, with engineering capstone, is that long history that you have with it. And I think we'll see some differences in one of the questions coming up, where business in some ways is ahead of engineering, but in a lot of ways it's engineering that's ahead because they have that history. But sometimes that history can slow down change.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Historically, our program was mechanical engineering, and it's only been in the last 5 years or so that we added in our electrical and computer engineering students. And just that change, there are hurdles to jump through on that, but we really see the value of the multidisciplinary program, and moving forward, we plan to stick with that. But there are still some who say, well, it would be easier to separate them out. But in terms of student experience as well as sponsor experience, we find it to be a huge positive.
Awesome. And the results we've got up on screen, pretty well split, kind of reflecting the data in our survey on the PowerPoint slide, but 63% of you saying yes. We've got a couple of questions that came in. So Arline, it looks like you're typing out an answer there. So we'll circle back on that real quick. Sandy Kenny asks, are BYU and Babson undergraduate focused? And I'll just add a sliver here and then turn it over to you two. So engineering is almost always going to be undergraduate focused. We do know some engineering grad programs. We do work with some, but it's that part of the accreditation requirement for undergrad. So at least when I ever hear about industry-based experiential and engineering, it's almost always undergrad. And undergrad's, I think, more of a focus for engineering relative to grad. Maybe someone will disagree with this, but than business, where grad is seen differently. But without going too deep on that, Arline, your program you mentioned before, basically undergraduate. It's a required undergraduate, but it includes graduate too, though. So do you want to talk about that just in relation to Sandy's question?
Sure. So I work in the undergraduate school, but we do have very similar programs in the graduate school as well. So that's number one. But in the Management Consulting Field Experience program, we also have a course where the undergraduates work with the graduate students. So in our program, our undergraduate teams are managed by an MBA student who's halfway through their program. So while the undergrads are learning how to consult, the MBA students are learning how to manage teams. And it works really, really well. And I'd be happy to talk to anyone who wants to learn more about that. We'll have our contact information up later, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I've got a point to drill down on that with you later too, about that recruitment of MBAs, because I had a question on that front. And then I saw you typed out a wonderful answer. So Lee asked, can you share the other two requirements for courses to fulfill the requirement, and how you came to those requirements? And I think it was for Arline. So Arline says, opportunity to present to the organization leaders and access to discuss and collaborate with organization leaders. So,
and actually, I didn't say how we got there, and that was through our undergraduate policy committee. So it was UAPC, it's faculty and staff and the deans, and they came up with these 5 parameters of what a course would need to meet in order to be approved for the advanced experiential requirement.
Undergraduate in engineering, our capstone is fully undergraduate, and we do hire coaches to coach the teams, and a couple of times we've had grad students, but typically the research faculty aren't willing to let their grad students take the time away from their graduate work to coach a team. So it really is undergraduate focused at BYU.
The next question, I like this one because I get asked it a lot. So it's good for me to know where things stand. Do you charge a project fee? And this is the rundown for this year, but it changed a bit year over year. So very slight majority at no fee. Last year, we saw, of course, a lot of schools drop their fee because they were worried about people having, money, and they just knew they had to bring in the projects. But that's old news. But the new news is that people are bringing the fees back. There's no right or wrong answer here, I don't think. It's your program, what are you delivering, and most importantly, what scale. If you have huge monster scale, you probably can't afford to recruit projects at a fee unless you hire people. And I know of schools, and probably some of you on here today, you have either you or somebody you've hired to go out and recruit those paid projects. That's an awesome model. But if you don't have that and you need lots of projects, that's going to be tough. Anyway, this is the rundown of programs that charge overwhelmingly in that 5 to 10K bit, but we have some super expensive ones. Engineering schools are a lot less likely to do free projects. A part of this was a mistake on my end. I should have split out a fee versus materials costs. And the reason why I think 62% of engineering charge a fee is because that would include materials costs. And engineering course a lot more likely to have a cost basis for those projects. And the school sometimes does absorb that, but normally I think from what I've seen, they pass that on to the project sponsor, which makes sense and perfectly fair. I guess you guys want to talk about that. So Arline, you said no fee here. Is that accurate? And what's the thinking there? And what do you like about not having to deal with a fee?
Right. So we don't charge a fee. However, our students do create an engagement contract with their clients at the beginning of the semester. And in that, we make it clear that the clients are responsible for any expenses incurred with the project. So if the students have to do a focus group and buy pizza, or if they have to make 30 color copies of the final presentation, or they're parking in Boston, those expenses do have to be covered by the client. We just don't have a budget to cover all of that. We don't charge a fee because, honestly, I don't want the clients coming back and saying this wasn't worth it, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do that. We are providing a service to our clients, and they are providing a service to us, right? I mean, they are helping us educate our students. They're giving us a real world experience. And our students are coming back and they're saying, wow, this was one of my best classes. I learned so much. When they go into interviews, they're saying, I talked about this experience and this is why I got the job, because I show that not only do I have the academic background to do this work, but I can show how I can apply what I've learned in the classroom to real world problems. So, you know, as long as the school doesn't make us charge a fee, I'm happy to provide this service without a fee. And again, just having the clients cover the expenses.
And Allyson, so you guys do charge a fee, and it's up to you if you want to share that detail or not. Completely up to you.
It's
But
public information. It's on our website. So we're in that 7%. We actually charge $22,000 per project, and only 1,500 of that goes toward materials. And so anything above 1,500 would be provided by the sponsor as well. So that is an issue for smaller businesses and for entrepreneurs, although we do projects for entrepreneurs and smaller businesses. We find that it's still a value if they look at how much they pay to have interns over the summer and the value of the projects. We feel like it's still a value. We've had some projects that have saved our sponsors millions of dollars over a span of years. And so we try to sell it that way. Obviously, it makes it more difficult to get projects. They aren't just handed to us. So that's the majority of my job, is going out and finding projects for our students. So I guess in that I pay my own salary. We're not funded by our university. So as a private university, we're not actually getting any university funds. So the fees that we charge run our entire capstone program.
do those fees that you bring in, again, if this is too personal, by all means, don't answer it. Do those fees that come in get quote unquote taxed by the university, where you have to send some money back to fund general school operations? Or are you able to keep everything within your program to reinvest?
We keep everything in our program, and really we just pretty much break even. So as I mentioned before, we hire external coaches to come in and coach the team. So we're paying coach salaries from that. We have a full administrative staff who does all the ordering for all of the teams, event planning and everything like that. And then I have a colleague in mechanical engineering who, together with me, gets all the projects and scopes them and gets them ready for the students. So she and I are engineers, and so we're out there, you know, traveling all over the country, really trying to find projects for the students. So we usually, honestly, most of our projects end up coming from national labs, defense contractors, and larger companies who are trying to hire our students. And so they're very invested in it from that angle.
And do you have and if you said this and I missed it, I'm sorry, I'm trying to run interference over here on the other stuff, but do you have a lower price option for, I know you mentioned usually large organizations. Do you have an option for smaller organizations, or just simple flat pricing?
It's just a flat fee for everyone. So we don't have anything like that.
Yeah, it keeps it simple.
I see a couple questions. So our projects are 2-semester projects with teams of about 6 students. So that kind of gives you an idea of the scale of that. So 8 months with 6 students, and they're working on it 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. So they're putting a lot of work into it.
And Arline, you spoke to that in the chat, but do you want to give a little info there on just the scope?
Our projects are semester long, so it's 14 weeks. There are 4 credit advanced elective, and the project is really the full course. The students meet for 4 hours a week, 2 hours as a team, and then 2 hours additionally with their MBA project leader. And then they have the client meetings outside of those 4 hours each week.
Okay. And for both of you, and I know Arline, with your projects not having a fee, but even still, you have to recruit partners that are invested. And some people say doing a fee gets skin in the game, but clearly you found a way to manage that investment without it. And as I'm sure a lot of schools have found that. Do you think the primary motivation for the employer or the industry partner is the product of the project, or is it recruitment?
I'll start with that. I think it's both. I think our clients really appreciate the new, fresh ideas that they get from our students. And often our students are the people that they're targeting, right? So they want to use our group to really see what it is our students are looking for, that age group. But I think also a lot of our companies are using them definitely for recruiting. It's like an internship, right? They have the students for 4 months. They work very closely with them. And we do have students that definitely get internship and full-time job offers post-project.
Okay, multidisciplinary. So we covered this a little bit already, but these were the results across all respondents. This was the first year we asked about across colleges, and honestly, this number was a lot higher than I expected. So we've got a quick poll here. I'm curious if you all are going to fall similarly or not. Let's see. And then in the meantime, we can look at this broken out by discipline. Within the college, multidisciplinary, more likely in engineering. That surprised me quite a bit. And the reason why it surprised me is because engineering is less likely to have a director or office of experiential learning. So I don't know who's organizing that. Let's see. I guess, Allyson, do you want to go first? Can you talk to us about your program here on the multidisciplinary front? Again, I know we already covered this a bit, but since it's relevant here.
Yeah, absolutely. Ours is within our own college, and honestly, I wish we could cross college boundaries a little more easily because computer science is in a different college here at BYU. And often I would love to have some computer science students on some of our projects, but what we find is crossing that college boundary becomes particularly tricky because of graduate requirements and different things like that, that just become too much of a hurdle to try to resolve over the summer while we're putting together projects. Eventually, I would love to see our entire engineering college participating with us, civil engineering, chemical engineering as well. And down the road, I think that's likely to happen with different sections for different types of projects. But right now, what we found is the electrical and computer, mechanical and manufacturing work very well together in a multidisciplinary setting because most of these projects require all of the disciplines in order to do a good job with them. So our experience has been very positive with the multidisciplinary.
Again, a lot of you surprised me here and said yes across colleges or schools in this live poll. If you have any context to add, drop it in chat or within the Q&A, because I'm curious and we can see that as a group. But that's exciting. I mean, but yeah, what Allyson said, I think is pretty common. People want to do it, but serious structural roadblocks, of course. Oh, this is of interest a bit. So year over year, really no change, but consistent gains until 2020, everything froze. And then now we seem at some kind of saturation point. But again, this surprised me a little. I talked to a lot of schools that echo, I think what Allyson just said, they want to do more of it. So there, I guess, room for growth. Maybe we've just hit a temporary ceiling. I guess we'll find out in the next couple of years.
We got some push from our sponsors in desiring multidisciplinary projects. It's more difficult for them to come up with quality projects in a single discipline than it is a multidisciplinary type project.
Arline, I'd love to get your reaction to that because I think for your program, you guys are really zeroed in on a discipline. Do you see benefits to that? I mean, of course, you can do a deeper dive if it's only one discipline, but is that tough to manage with sponsors, as Allyson has run into, it sounds like?
Well, I mean, we're a business school, so that's really all we have.
Well, I mean, but within business, though, maybe I misread your input, but I thought they were your projects. Are they siloed by business discipline, like a marketing project, or are there? Okay.
Yeah, they really are. Our clients tend to come in and they'll have a marketing or a finance or an analytics or they tend to be very siloed within business.
We'll get back to some of the data results in a bit. These are the open inputs that we had in the survey innovations. When Allyson and I presented this last time, some genius in the audience pointed out that not all those are innovations. These are, of course, relative. These are what people are recognizing as innovations in their program. You may have other innovations and post it in the chat if you do, and so we can learn from that. But this was some of the selected inputs. We don't have room for everything. So if you input it here and I missed it, sorry, it wasn't intentional. But incorporating elements of character development, entrepreneurship, I thought that was cool. It's as soft skill as you can get. And from what I hear from a lot of educators is that's part of the value here, are soft skills. This one I love, launching multidisciplinary mixed academic Projects, and this one's one of my favorites. We've implemented scaffolding of iterative assignments to ensure students get feedback along the way. And by the time you get to the final end project, there've been checkpoints. A lot of you may already be doing that, but I know I hear from a lot of people, if they're operating at scale, that they don't know there's an issue with their projects until their teams, either one, until it's too late, or clients or mentors. There's so many stakeholders. We created a project health feature to help with this, but there is no silver bullet. And I'm sure you all have different strategies. And then there's always somebody who has two teams they oversee and they don't have this problem. But if you're at scale, really common problem. Don't feel bad if it's something you run into, but maybe there's something useful in here for you.
David, we implemented an assignment that where mid-semester the students have to do a mid-semester presentation to the client that kind of shows them where they're at that point. And that really gives us the opportunity to make sure the students are doing something valuable for the client. And if the team needs to pivot at that point, they have the time to still pivot, and we're sure to be able to give the client something valuable at the end of the semester.
That's a great point, and that sounds wonderful. Who makes the decision about whether or not to pivot? Is that solely up to the team? Is there faculty oversight there? What works for you there?
So this mid-semester presentation would be the team and the MBA project leader and the client. So the faculty actually are not present at that. This is really between the team and the client. So if the client's not happy, we'll hear about it from the project leader when they come back to class the next week. And then we talk about how we can help that team get to where they need to be. So all of our project leaders in that class really act as coaches for each other, as well as obviously Professor Weintraub, kind of leading the whole team.
So built-in checks and balances.
Exactly.
I love hearing from people that say that's not a problem. I always ask, how many projects do you have? 1.5 is usually the answer. Sales engineering, partnership between sales and engineering program. I just thought that was cool because that is a job that exists, kind of a new-ish job. I think, at least I never heard of it until 5-10 years ago. And having a program designer around it sounds neat. More intentionality around project matching with student needs. That's a great to have, but how do you get there? And then you got to be able to source more projects, and that probably means dropping your fee, or hiring more resources. So it's not really a silver bullet, but nice to have. This one I like because I thought it was super actionable, and I'm sure a lot of you do this or something similar already. But orientation lunches for the employer mentors, and I assume they mean the employer client. But mentor client, whatever you call them, that will work with the student teams. It's helped set expectations and provide clarification. Arline, we talked about this previously, but setting expectations with the client. And we have a survey question coming up on that, but just it's relevant here, I think. You can do everything you want to message everything perfectly and cleanly to the client, but do they receive it? Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that something where you found any nice tricks, or perhaps something like what we see on screen?
So we do a memorandum of understanding before the semester starts, and that really kind of clearly outlines our expectations of the client and what they can expect from us and the team. Before COVID, we also had in-person orientations. So we would have everyone to campus, and all the clients, all the teams would sit down and would, really clearly show those expectations. We'd go through, a slide deck, and Professor Weintraub and I would talk about what the expectations were. Obviously, once COVID hit, we moved all that online. Now we do separate orientations for the students and the clients. We just do kind of a brain shark video that we send off to the clients. I also, any new client, I have a phone call with them, before the project even starts, before I send them the memorandum of understanding. I'll have a call with them and just talk to them about how our program works. For me or for our teams, one of the really critical components is that the client responds fairly quickly to the students' requests for information and data. If clients disappear for a week or two, that really demotivates the team. And obviously the client isn't going to get as much out of that team at the end of the semester. So I think keeping, the communication open and touching base. We do have clients that I put on what I lovingly call the do not invite list. So if we have, a bad, semester with a client and it's just the communication isn't working, we just make sure that, they're not, I don't assign another project to them, because as you all know, I'm preaching to the choir here, our semesters fly by and there just isn't time for our students to sit and wait for the data that they need.
Allyson, do you have any thoughts? Have you seen something similar where you have to really structure it up front, or what does that look like for you?
Very similar. Yeah, we typically start our projects 1 week and let the students kind of gently and slowly immerse themselves in the whole product development experience. And then the following week, we bring our sponsors on campus and have them meet directly with the teams. Obviously, I've had a lot of interaction with them before that point. We ask our coaches to contact them before that point, but that kickoff day where they sit and the teams talk with the sponsors is imperative. I think that's where they really learn what they're going to be doing. They've read the proposal, they've had a little while to come up with some questions, and it's at that meeting that they really take off. And then we encourage that on a weekly basis, that they communicate with their sponsors. And many of ours are throughout the country, so it's usually over Zoom, but we really try to have them meet weekly with their sponsors and stay in touch that way.
Real quick for both of you, easier or harder with a repeat client?
Easier.
Much easier.
Much easier. Great. The next question, this is probably my favorite, Office of Experiential Learning or Director. Is there dedicated resourcing here? And business has a strong lead, and that doesn't surprise me. A little bit newer program. Engineering, and in my experience, is built up department level organization here. They have someone designated each year. Usually this is the capstone person. Often it's the same faculty each year, and they just have to worry about their department. Business tends to take a more college-wide tact, or they're at least a little more likely to. And then here's some insight from over time. So lots of gain. Multi-college was a drop this year, but that's a real small sample size, but pretty substantial gain. And this is huge, 28% to almost 50% in just 4 years. That's something that I thought this would have happened a few years ago, but of course it takes time to create new offices and allocate budget and et cetera. So I think, yeah, go ahead.
Interesting experience here. We, as a university, had an overall Office of Experiential Learning, and they had a director. They've since mostly done away with that, because what we found was that people who want to work with engineering come to engineering and work with engineering, and people who want to work with business go to business. And we tend to run it a little better in our own colleges versus having an overall university level where they can't possibly understand the nuances of each college's program in that. So they've kind of shifted away from that.
Well, and I think that's actually a lot more common, and I think this actually agrees with that. So most people are doing it at the college level. The university level stuff, at least I've personally come across, are a little lighter touch, maybe career offices and things, although even that's often college level. But the part where it's really intimate, these live projects, that's normally college level. But even that, that's a step above what has been the standard and still is 52%, which is it's not at the college level, it's departmental, or it's just sort of ad hoc. So I think what you're saying agrees with this. And Arline, you represent a yes on this too. What has it been that way as long as you've been there? I actually don't know the history of Babson of having, a structural approach to experiential, or is this just part of that new advanced experiential office and maybe it's brand new?
So it is new. It is new at Babson, and I was just thinking I probably answered that we didn't have an office when I did that, and now we do. So I think we're part of that trending upwards. We have a formal office now. It's wonderful. The school knows how important this is, and they're putting resources behind it. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, it's almost like if you don't have a stake in the ground to say this is our department or office of experiential, it's hard to get resources. Like there's no structure there to lobby for this. And I've come across a lot of schools that struggle with that. They might have one faculty or staff person really excited about EL, really fantastic at organizing this stuff, but they're not part of an office. It's just a secondary role they picked up. And then how do you translate that into resources so you can make impact? That one can be kind of tough. David Knox just asked, what are the main responsibilities of a formal Office of Experiential Learning? Yeah, it's a great question. My light experience on this is that it's often revolves around project recruitment. But Arline, Allyson, do you want to take a stab at that? What's been your experience?
So for our capstone, we do have a formal director who, like you said, David, he's a faculty member, one of the ones who started our capstone program 30 plus years ago. And he's kind of the hammer on things. So when a final decision has to be made, he's the one who makes it. But, you know, I'm out recruiting projects, my colleagues out recruiting projects. So we divide that responsibility. I think for us anyway, it kind of has to be a faculty member to go in and carry that weight to be able to move things forward. So final answers on financial decisions, final answers on hiring, things like that is what our director does. And he also is an instructor for the course part of it.
And Arline, your program's brand new at this, but do you have a sense for so far or where things are headed? What's that primary responsibility? Or maybe there's several responsibilities.
Yeah, so we have kind of two distinct areas within our Office of Experiential Learning. We have our foundation and then our advanced. Our foundation folks, we have a team of 3 or 4 right now, and they work with our first year students. I think we mentioned earlier that all of our first year students are required to start a business. We call it FME, Foundation of Management and Entrepreneurship. And so our students come in, and the first semester they ideate business ideas, they vote on the top ones, and then for the second semester, they start all these businesses. So we'll take our 600 or 680 first year students, divide them into 20 or 30 groups, and they each start a business first year. So that team that supports that, I mean, we have banking and we have simulations and we have a whole team that supports those students as they go through the process of starting a business, running a business, and then at the end of the year, closing the business. I'm on the advanced side, so I do this management consulting field experience program, and I'm also responsible for approving other courses that will meet our new advanced experiential graduation requirement. I'll provide support to faculty members, help them identify resources. I'm working cross-campus with our different institutes and centers to kind of pull all of our contacts together and better utilize all these clients and people we have that want to work with Babson students, so that we, do the approach with more of a one Babson approach as opposed to all these different silos that are kind of tough to break down often in higher ed.
That word support sticks out to me as really crucial, because when you ask people, where do you need support? What's your constraint? I find highly varies by school, by where are you, urban campus, are you rural campus, and on and on. Do you have lots of international students, on and on. But I've had a lot of conversations with school leadership where they pronounce, we want to do more experiential learning. And then the question we often have is, okay, how are you supporting? And that's self-interested. We provide a platform that's designed to support experiential learning. So that's part of why we're asking, do you have resources, right? But the reality is, if they're not doing anything to support it, and at some schools they're not, it's just happening, then how can you say you want more of it? Are you just hoping faculty will put more hours in, or you're hoping more faculty will raise their hand to teach a model that takes more time but doesn't pay more? It's a little funky. Obviously, we're all here on this call because passionate about the topic. So that's a lot of the reason. Even the schools that are in that 52% that don't have, that formal support, they could still get done beautiful world-class experiential learning. There's no question. But if you're in leadership and you want more of it, does it have to be a formal director office? I think that's best to have that stake in the ground. But what is there? Is there anything? Or because I just know this from firsthand knowledge, a lot of times it is just up to the faculty to figure everything out, reinvent the wheel, answer all these little minutia questions. Do we charge? How do we structure it? Legally, how is it organized? How do we recruit students if it's not a requirement? On and on. It just goes forever. And that's aside from the fact that you then have to run the course. But a big part of the support, and this blends into our next question, where do projects come from? And often we're going to ask this to the audience too in a second. Often they come from, let me get to the one. There we go. Office of Experiential Learning. This was almost a zero a few years ago. It is rising. It is rising slowly. Faculty referrals, though, are still number one. And I have a quick thought on this because I talk to schools a lot on this, where they'll say, we want to support experiential learning better. We really want to. We'll launch this poll here. Where do your projects come from? But the constraint, or not the constraint, I'm sorry, I shouldn't do two things at once. The issue is we don't want to cut faculty out, or maybe faculty are saying, look, we put our reputation on the line. These are our connections. We're bringing in projects. And this is borne out here. Over 52% of the projects is measured by our survey or faculty referrals. You don't want to put a stop to that. And you don't want to force the faculty to have to recruit their relationships and push them to other faculty, because that's not really fair. If they want to do that, that's awesome, but not really fair to do that. But I think there is a middle ground, and I think it's let faculty recruit directly for themselves. You don't have to stop that. But if you have an office of experiential, or if you don't, you can maybe loop in a career office, or have other institutions and other organizations in the school that have touch points with community, with industry. Let them know you do projects, have a form, have a process, bring those projects in. Minor plug, in our product, you can recruit projects centrally and not or, but and, well, it could be or, but and at the program or class or department level. So you don't have to do one or the other. You really can't do both and make it supplemental. Career office dropped off a bit. That's, let me see. All right, sorry, let me publish these results that just came in. Career office was down a little, but in reality, I'm just showing you the stock ranking. The change was very, very small. I think career offices can play a huge role here, but I've heard from a lot of people, they just need to be educated. What are these projects? And if they know about them, do they know what the different programs are? If they can send projects to an Arline or an Allyson, or many of you on this call, and they know you personally, fantastic. But what if there's nobody there? There is no office. They have to just know every faculty that teaches experiential. That's not really realistic. These are the results that came in. So faculty, yeah, I mean, this is really consistent with our poll. Faculty connections, a little lower here, but still substantial. Faculty, alumni, number 2. Office of EL tied with alumni. That's great. Office of Experiential Learning. Student source is a little tricky because that really includes two things. Do the students originate the project? Like with Arline, your first year course, they're creating a business that is student sourced. But sometimes, especially if we're talking grad program, of course, these are students who have connections. Third-party vendor. What we found, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the most sustainable thing to do is empower schools to really do a great job recruiting projects from their own networks. Because if you can't recruit great projects from your networks, it's probably tough to get them from just generic universal marketplaces. But there definitely are employers that want your students, and often they do projects because they want your students. So if you're thinking, where do I get projects come from? You have a lot of options, but that is one option, is go to those partners that are already recruiting your students and ask them. Preaching to the choir here. I'm sure a lot of you on here already do that. A couple chat points came in. Oh, this is great. So Jorge Rodriguez says state economic development offices are great allies. Yeah, that's awesome. And I bet a lot of programs aren't tapped into that. I definitely wouldn't have thought of that. David Knox asked, would it be possible to copy these slides? Yeah, I'm going to email them out afterward. Lowell Valencia Miller at Daniels College of Business, University of Denver. We have recruitment going through our external relations and development office. Awesome. Experiential learning is focused on international travel and outdoor experientials. Or experiences, probably. Yeah, great. But there's just a rich tapestry of partners to help. And Arline, Allyson, is there anything else on this topic that in your mind about just building those relationships? You mentioned earlier, repeat partners are really helpful. Any thoughts on how to keep folks coming back?
Well, I think we give them great recommendations, right? They really enjoy working with our students, and they get a lot of benefit out of the results from the projects. But I also want to tap in on what one of the chat people said. Our development office is really big on sending projects our way, and it's just a great way to, and I guess that's alumni too, right? Because that's mostly who's coming through the development office. But it's just a really great way to get the alumni re-engaged, and people are more likely to donate if they're getting something back from Babson. So it's the development office has been a great source of projects for me.
And that's the key, right? There's a win in it for them. And I've talked to some folks in those kinds of offices, and that, but also analogs like with employer relations and stuff. And I think the initial concern, at least that I've heard, is, well, if we have to add this to our menu of items we're offering, might that detract from our core metrics that we're measured against? Well, one option is also to measure against this and make that one of those core metrics. But the other side of it, more important, is it could be a win-win. And you're saying that's been your experience.
Absolutely.
And I would agree with that and echo, do a good job for them on a project and they're likely to want to come back. Even if it's not consecutive years, we'll often have sponsors who'll come every other year or things like that. So just that experience, I think, interacting with the students, they love that when they have that opportunity and do a great job on their project, and they'll be back typically.
Great. And the next item, how many projects? So this is the distribution across all disciplines as measured by our survey here. And then let's look at a couple different breakdowns. So Arline, I think your number was 36 to 50. Is that still accurate? Or of course, stuff has been in motion since then.
Yeah, we typically do 15 to 20 a semester. So I think that's correct.
Right in the ballpark. Okay.
Yeah.
And is that, I mean, that's just, you're getting the projects to your student population, that is the size that makes sense? Or is there any talk of, we want to do industry projects earlier in the curriculum, or is it's in the place where it needs to be right now, with it being that senior year capstone type experience?
For us, it's mostly juniors and seniors. And that's really, we are a small school. And so that's about how many projects we can handle with the number of student applicants. So I typically have about 100 students each semester that apply to this program. I'd love to start doing a summer program as well. We haven't done that yet, but I see that in our future, and that will add, probably another 15 or 20 projects.
Well, and it sounds like you already have a lot of irons in the fire. So
we do.
You seem really eager to jump into more responsibility, which is awesome. And to me, it sounds overwhelming, but what do I know? I would be scared of all that, but yeah, that is really exciting. And I know a lot of programs in the audience, you have summer programs that you've launched. Sometimes I think that could be an opportunity to do something a little more bespoke with the client. It's maybe not as married to the academic calendar. Maybe it is, but I know sometimes it's not. And then maybe you can charge. And I guess, Arline, if you did a program like that, would that be when you'd want to introduce a fee, or would you want to keep it's free, it's totally open and egalitarian, and anyone who has a great project can participate?
So I think I want to keep it free. And I think one of my motivations, in addition to just getting more students this experience and getting more Babson students in front of more clients, is that we have a very high international student population. And it's not surprising to any of you out there that often our international students have a tough time finding internships. So this is a great way to get our students some, really valuable industry experience, get them in front of employers, help them build their resume. The school's also going to generate some income from it, right? I mean, they'll be paying tuition for it. So it's, I think it's just another one of those win-win-wins where we can support more students, support more organizations, and get Babson out in front of more organizations. So we'll see. I mean, in the past, one thing that held me back was we didn't have the MBA project leaders available during the summer because of their curriculum. But we're now shifting into occasionally running the program with faculty as mentors. So with faculty mentors, we could do it during the summer. And we'd probably just do, I'd think probably one class or two, so 5 or 10 teams. I don't think we'd get up to that 15 or 20 teams in the summer. And again, when you think, people vacation in the summer, so clients might not be as available. So I would imagine it might be a little more difficult sourcing projects for the summer. But it's something, that's sitting out there in the parking lot for me to think about, and how we can do it once we get other things buckled down.
Do you use an NDA? So this one, when Allyson and I presented this live, there were some good questions around, well, which side is NDA-ing? And we didn't specify that here. It's just, do you use an NDA? You both marked, Arline and Allyson, that you use one as standard. But clearly for a lot of programs, most programs, it's just that the client insists. But just real quick, any thoughts on, why standardize it? What's the benefit of that?
It gives our sponsors a level of kind of security with that. So our NDA is between BYU Capstone and our students. They're not signing NDAs with the sponsor specifically. So it kind of helps with the expectations, which I know is down in the presentation, but it helps our sponsors understand our students are not your employees, but we have them under NDA so that they're not able to discuss particulars of the project that you don't want them to share.
So we did have a standardized NDA up until this semester, and our legal team informed me that we could no longer use it, that the NDA needed to be between the client and the students and that it was not between, and by us providing it, it appeared that it was between us and the client. So we now, I informed the clients and I told them they are welcome to provide an NDA to the students. However, we are no longer providing the standardized NDA. And then we, did some education with the students, instructing them how to read an NDA. And if they had any questions, they had to check with their own legal counsel.
I'm old enough to remember when we were told eggs were bad for you, and then they were good for you, and then they were bad for you. And that reminds me of the legal back and forth at a lot of these schools where it needs to be done this way, it needs to be done that way. There doesn't seem to be clear identified processes, best practices from legal, how to treat this. And that seems to be true with the revenue that comes in. Do you structure it as a gift? Is it work for hire? I could talk to 10 schools legal departments and come up with 6 different opinions somehow, even though there's only a couple options there. But it'd be nice if school legal departments would talk to each other or somehow standards emerged here. But it's tough because then even in real time, you're having to deal with that shift, even within the one school. And then there are lots of different opinions here. On this topic, Lee asks, do students have access to legal advice on campus? How do students typically get legal counsel readily, especially if the course is a requirement? That's a good point. Or maybe they don't, but Arline, on your front, do you have any idea there?
They don't have access to our legal team. Our team is representing Babson. The course is not a requirement. It's an elective. So I'm still working on it. This is brand new to me. I'm not sure where we're going to land, but I'm sure there's going to be many more discussions over the next few months.
And there's potentially upside for the students too. I mean, presumably if the client is insisting on an NDA, there's probably some meat there that they're getting to work with. And that's its own reward in a way, but certainly giving them access to some inputs there would probably be helpful. And Lee had some more commentary. We were struggling with the legal implications of NDAs. Yeah, I mean, that was interesting, is that everybody's kind of struggling with that. As I say, it'd be nice if some standards would emerge. Setting clear expectations with project sponsors. So most people, almost everybody strongly agrees or somewhat agrees. And we went through and talked about this, Allyson and Arline, last week. And I mentioned, I bet if you asked companies if this is true, they probably would feel a little differently, but it's just gut instinct. We don't have any data to support that. But Arline, you brought up a great point that, well, they have a responsibility to hear the expectations, right?
They have to read it. They have to read what we send them. They have to listen to what we say. And I'm not sure that always happens. And it's the same with the students, right? We all have problems with people reading emails and, getting it through the first sentence or two and then not reading the rest. And I don't know how we're going to solve that problem. And if anyone has an idea, please ping me. I would love to know how to get people to read their emails.
Yeah.
Or the information we provide.
Right. But you did say the memorandum of understanding, and I increasingly see schools do that. And that yep. I think is helpful, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is just the breakdown, same question by discipline. Again, we'll send these slides out. In general, you believe industry projects are growing in importance. Every year it's been strongly agree. So I'm going to have to change this language to, in general, you believe it's like super tapped out, because it can't just grow every year. But clearly this is top priority for so many of you. And that's why, we get this result. And both of you said strongly agree there. And then the next one, how important for the first job. So Arline, you said strongly agree. Allyson, you said somewhat. And you want to give a commentary on that somewhat?
Yes, I think it's just the nature of the job market right now. And I specifically work with electrical and computer engineering. And a lot of our students coming into their senior year have already done an internship and they're already committed to a company. And so that's why I kind of backed off of the strongly agree, because many of our seniors already have jobs.
There's nowhere else for them to go. They already have the job. They're already, but then might that be an opportunity to do this earlier in the curriculum so that they're even better prepared for that job?
I wish. We've talked about doing parts of it junior year, but our curriculum is so stuffed full as it is that there's not really an opportunity to do.
Measuring learning outcomes, these were the results. Only 10% said no, so not surprising. Most people feel like thoroughly, or at least sporadically, clearly you've got to give a grade if it's curricular. So that is a learning outcome measurement. There's other stuff you can do. I know, Arline, for you, peer surveys is, I think, part of this equation. Is that right?
We do a 360 survey, middle and end of the semester. So where the students evaluate their own work, their team members, and they're also evaluated by their manager, by their program leader. And then the program managers sit down and have a discussion with each individual mid-semester and end of semester to compare, you know, kind of how you rated yourself and how your teammates rated yourself and how they rated you. And it's really good feedback for the students to help them grow.
So there's the reflection on top of the feedback, which I think is
absolutely yes.
Okay. Do you maintain records? So almost everyone said some degree of yes, which is awesome. This has moved a lot in the last several years, and a function of a lot of things, but part of it is more likely to have an office to keep these records to begin with.
And
all right, go ahead. And
edu-sourced.
I'm sorry, Arline, I didn't hear that part. What was that? Yeah, I appreciate that. And that is part of our value, is it's a place for the projects, and everything that gets completed in it, including those peer surveys you mentioned, it's all tied back. It's also something you can pull out when needed, but it's there. And I think having those records is helpful. To me, it's been exciting to see experiential learning, really, in my observation, in the last however many years we've been doing this, has evolved from its courses that get taught, and they can be absolutely world-class, take nothing away from that, but they're just courses that are there, to this is something institutionally critical. And watching that evolution has been really fun. And so when people say higher ed moves slowly, I feel like that's not always the case. That moved to me fairly quickly. But of course, there are challenges. We had a chat point. That's kind of interesting. For our first student-run agency students, we are comparing first-year salary after graduation versus regular students who didn't go through the program. Maria, if you have the result of that and you want to post it, please do. If you don't want to post it, that's fine. But I'd be curious what that difference is. I've heard a lot of people want to do that. I don't know. I've heard of that data point. I've talked to employers that have said when they pick students up out of these programs, they just hit the ground running much faster. How the market accepts student going through PBL, including salary. Yeah, that's really getting to Maria's point. Arline or Allyson, do either of you have any thoughts on that? Or I guess if it's basically it's happening, it's a requirement, you wouldn't have a control group.
We don't have any data on that.
Yeah, well, and you couldn't, right? Because everybody's doing it.
Everyone has to do it, right?
Yeah, they're all getting that benefit. David says, I would expect new graduate salary rates to be pretty consistent. I don't know that I would.
Not the case for us. So
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think I would expect that. Okay, biggest challenge, finding projects, companies. It's funny. So let me go to, I'm just going to go quickly. Look at this. So this is, look how different these are. This guy says soliciting, whomever wrote this, soliciting projects is the tough part, getting clients. More projects that we could take on, gaining faculty to lead the project. These are all different people. Getting the students. This is literally all four of the possible things that exist in our known universe that can be constraints. And for different programs, one of them is the constraint. I mean, I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's highly varied what that constraint is. Gaining faculty to commitment to lead projects. Yeah, that's a tough one. You know, what's in it for them? You always have those people that are really passionate. They're going to do it no matter what. But how do you need to get more than that? And if so, how? More faculty, fewer projects, but then that's its own issue. A lot of schools will involve alumni and other external mentor folks to help lessen the burden and also bring that real world component to the table. Effective oversight at the college level. This is a big one. Departments and programs have their own policies, procedures, and records. For most schools, this is incremental. I know of schools, we work with schools where this was done all at once, but it's very rare. It's very rare. We just had a question. What are the privacy terms of EduSource's data shared using the platform remains confidential? The short answer is yes, but our full privacy policy is online. And I'd encourage you to take a look at that if you're curious. And you can email me afterward if you want to have a direct conversation. But yeah, basically it is confidential. We recognize it's important for schools to own that information and those relationships. Biggest challenge, getting the students to engage initially. I mean, I'm sure you could pick one of these for anyone on this call. This one here, the lack of director of experiential learning. So they're in that 52% that don't have that yet, to strategically coordinate and support. But not everyone has the money and all the resources to do that. So that might be a rock and hard place type situation. Biggest challenges here, a handful more. Go quickly. I want to respect everybody's time. Hey, check this one out though. This one I like. All right. What's your biggest challenge? This is an individual. I know who this person is. This is not an American school, but I'm of course not going to mention who this is. What's your biggest challenge? We have each year, this is their biggest challenge. 1,700 students, 350 projects, 1 faculty coordinating. How's that for scale?
That stresses me out just seeing it.
We're onboarding this person and it stresses me out too. Yeah, but I mean, amazing, right? Tremendous student population size that they have, and they're able to get everyone a real project. And I'm sure it took them years to get to that point. I don't actually know the history of that program, but this is where they are now. So they have some structural stuff in place to identify when issues pop up for sure. But yeah, pretty amazing. Everybody has a different perspective on what scale is. I mean, that's the point. To some people, 10 projects is scale. Those projects might be really deep and involved, and that is real scale. But there's just no one size fits all as to what constitutes, scale. And David said maybe 1 employer with 3. I happen to know that's not the case. It's a lot. I don't know that it's 350 employers. I don't believe it is, but that would be a lot easier. But that's not what it is. These are real projects. Okay, so what advice would you give? Set expectations early. That's one thing. We'll go through a couple of these. As I put these up on screen, Arline, Allyson, do you want to share if you just one bit of advice, somebody's starting out, they want to do experiential learning, what do you think?
Start small, just start with a couple of projects, and, communicate with the clients, with the teams, with the faculty. And see what the students want, see what the clients want, and make sure that that's what you're addressing.
And I think if I were just starting out, scope would be a big issue. There's a great tendency to have much too large of a scope. The students really aren't able to accomplish as much as sponsors would like them to accomplish in the amount of time. And so keeping the scope to a reasonable level would be something I would pay a lot of attention to.
And on the scope, making sure it's very specific and clear. Big scopes are really challenging for the teams, and they just spin their wheels for weeks trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
These are the last couple items, and then we will, with that, close out. Thank you all for being on here and the great insights in the chat and the polling. And Arline and Allyson, thanks for the commentary and the expertise you can bring to the table with your histories. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for doing this, David. And feel free to reach out if anyone has any questions. Happy to talk with people.
Same. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Talk to you all soon. Thanks for coming, everybody. This stuff will all be posted on our site, edusource.com. There's a little section that says Experiential Academy. If you click that, that's where it'll be. But if you want to look at our past history, that's there already. And we'll also send an email when the slides and everything get posted. But thanks, everybody. Really, really appreciate the discussion. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.